What's up guys, Leon Petru here, and in today's video we are going to be doing something very exciting. It's a more advanced concept. We are going to be working with UiPath APIs, and basically what we are going to be doing is we are going to be triggering a bot through a front-end public-facing web application. So this is a web application. You can see it's hosted at this URL here, and then it's a simple addition app that we are going to build where somebody enters just a first and a second number, and then they click RunBot, and then it'll add those two numbers together and it'll return it to the front end. Now obviously a simple bot like this you can build directly within a web application, but let's say you're building a more advanced type of bot, then you can basically use a public facing front end built on a platform such as Bubble, and then the back end of the application is being run in a bot on a remote desktop computer hosted somewhere in the cloud. So basically what you would do is you'd have the user have a very simple front end interface where they just enter some inputs and some variables. They then click run. The bot then goes in the background. It triggers a bot to run in the remote desktop environment over here. The bot starts running, and then it'll return the output of that bot back to the front end application over here. So you can imagine that there are plenty use cases. So for example, let's say you had some fields here such as maybe a LinkedIn bot. You can say you would enter say a occupation like engineer, for example, and then you'd enter an area such as the USA, and then you can run the bot, and then the bot will then go, it'll open LinkedIn, it'll then scrape a whole lot of engineers profiles based in the USA, and then it'll return say an Excel spreadsheet in the front end over here, which is basically a super simple interface to scrape data from LinkedIn, but it is using RPA in the background, or in our specific case we are using UiPath. All right, so that's just a use case, but the main purpose of this video is to show you how to actually set this up. So I have created some documentation here for you, so I will share this in the link in the description where you can download it. It's exact step-by-step instructions you need on how to set all of this up, both in UiPath and in Bubble. All right, so what you're going to need to get started, you're going to need a Bubble.io account. So you can use a free account created at Bubble.io. All right, I'm already logged in here, and then I can just click new app. If you do want to learn Bubble, I do have a course on Udemy teaching how to use Bubble. It's called the Complete Bubble Developer course. I'll also include a link in the description to that. Second, you're going to need a UiPath account with an unattended license. All right, so you can use the free community edition provided by UiPath to do that. So in this specific case, I already have an unattended license connected to this remote desktop computer. If you want to learn how to assign an unattended license to a machine, I do have another video on that, so I'll also include the link to that in the description below. Cool, so let's get started. We can come to Bubble.io, all right, and we can click on create new app. All right, we can give it a name. I'm going to call this the addition bot, because all it's going to do is add two numbers together. So I'll click, let me just say it's a external or customer facing app. All right, and then your goal with this application is just going to say just playing around. All right, create a new app. It still needs this. What kind of app? I'm just going to say other, create new app. Okay, so if you're still wondering what Bubble is a web application which you can use to build other web applications without writing a line of code. So it's incredible. It's a really awesome tool. Okay, I'm just gonna delete everything here. I should have just started with a blank process. Right, just deleted everything. Cool. So now we just have a blank front end. I'm just going to give our app a name. I'm going to call it Edition Bot. I'll even maybe create a little plus as the logo, Edition Bot. I'm going to remove the style. I'm going to make the text a bit bigger from a 16 to say 24. Maybe I'll even bold it, and yeah, that should be fine. I was going to change the font here. Seems to be lagging. There you go. So let's change the font to say this. Cool. We then are going to have two inputs. All right, so I'll click the input button over there, and then I'll drag and drop an input field. So I'm just going to write as a placeholder text enter first number. Then I'll drag in another input field, or in fact I can even copy this one, Control CV, and then I will say enter second number. Cool. I'll just line these up so it's nice and neat. I'll then drag in a button, which you can just call it RunBot, just like that. And then what it's going to do is it's going to return an output. So we're going to enter a number here. So any any user anywhere around the world who has access to the URL of the app can enter the first number and the second number, and then they can click run bot and it'll run the bot. So I just want to mention as a side note, there is a product called UiPath Apps. Right now, UiPath Apps is a very similar thing. It allows you to build an app, a front-end application, which triggers a RPA bot in the background. However, the problem with it is it can only be used internally. So only people who have a UiPath license and are logged into that specific tenant can actually use the app that you create. So the main difference here between what we're doing with Bubble and UiPath Apps is the Bubble application is public facing, whereas the UiPath app product is internal facing. So I do also have a video on UiPath Apps. If you want to learn that, I'll link to that in the description below. Cool, so I'll close that. Back to Bubble. All right, so I'm just going to click preview here, and then it's going to preview our web application. So you can see here, editionbot.bubbleapps.io, and then here is our app. All right, so currently we haven't set any workflows or anything to actually make this work, but let's get into that now. So we have done step one. We have created our Bubble account. Step two, create your UiPath account and assign an unattended license. I'm assuming you've already done that. Next steps, we want to install a plugin called the API connector. So come to plugins, click add plugins, and type in API connector. It's already here, so I'm just going to click install. Done. Now you'll see there's an API connector where we can click this button here to add another API. So I'm going to click add another API, give it a name. I'm going to call this Edition Bot. All right, and then over here is where we create our API calls. Okay, and you can click this button to add an additional API call. You click this expand button so you can enter all the fields. All right, so if you've never used APIs, don't worry, I'm going to make it super simple for you. If you don't know what an API is, an API stands for Application Programming Interface, and all it really is a way to transfer data between different applications. So in this case, we are using an API to send data to UiPath and to get data from UiPath. So to send data to, you use what you call a post, and then to get data, you'd use a get. You also get other ones like put, patch, delete, but in this case, we're only going to be using the post and get API calls. Great. So if we come to the documentation here, you can see I have separated into 5 separate steps. So first step, we are going to get a client ID and refresh token. Second step, we're going to authenticate. Step 3, we are going to get a release key. Step 4, start a job. So step 4, this is where we're actually going to integrate the API which starts the actual job. And that's what happens when you click this run button. It's going to trigger this start job. All these previous steps are necessary just so we are able to execute this start a job API. Then step 5, we have a get output result, and this is where we are going to basically get the output from the bot and display it in the front end over here. We are going to basically display the result of the addition of the two numbers. And that is basically it. Then we have some workflows here on how we set it up in Bubble, which we'll get to a bit later. All right, so I should have already warned you, but this is going to be quite a long video, but I will try keep it as engaging as possible. And don't worry, I'm going to cut out any fluff, so everything I include in this video is going to be super helpful. Great. So next step, we need to create an actual bot. All right, so this is the bot that's going to be running on the remote desktop over here. So let's go and create that. I'm going to come to UiPath, click process. I'm going to give it a name. I'll also just call it addition bot. And I will use VB as a language and click create. So I'll just wait for that to open up. Cool. Click open main workflow. Great. So let's start off with, let's actually just keep this super simple. I'll just create a message box. Okay. And in the message box, it's going to display the result of two numbers. So let's maybe use an assign first. So an assign where we are going to create an argument. So let's create our arguments first. So we'll create an argument saying, let's call it addition result. And the direction we can set it to art. And let's set the argument type to an integer. Then we have two input variables. So we'll have the first number, and we'll have another argument, call it the second number. Make sure these arguments are also set to integers. Right, and then the addition result, right, is going to be equal to the sum of the first number plus second number. Super simple. And then the message box, we are going to display the addition result. So currently there's no default value, so if we run this, it's not going to return a result. But let's just for instance add 1 plus 1. All right, so the first number and the second number are both 1. Let's run this. And there's our message box with the result of the number 2. Great. Okay, so I'm just going to click OK. I'll leave the defaults as 1 and 1, but yeah, I'll just leave that for now. So the next steps now is we need to publish this UiPath workflow to Orchestrator. So I'm currently on my own personal PC right now, so I made sure that I was logged into the same UiPath Orchestrator in UiPath Assistant over here as I am in the remote desktop. So you can see here these processes in the remote desktop are the same as these processes on my actual PC, my local computer. So I'm going to click publish, and it should then publish it to the same orchestrator. Make sure you publish it to the tenant, all right, and not the personal workspace. The personal workspace feed is basically only bots which are going to be running on my local computer or the personal workspace. The tenant process is the ones we're going to be running in remote desktops. So I'll select the tenant process feed. We can then click publish. It says publishing package. Great. So the addition bot has now successfully been published. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to, actually we don't even need to open the remote desktop. We can go on my local PC and log into UiPath Orchestrator over here on the same account. Great. So I'm already signed in, and then I'm going to click on my default tenant over here. Then you can see here we have my first folder. This is a folder we created in a previous YouTube video. We have a shared folder, and this is the My Workspace. So when we published, if we selected My Workspace, remember over here, we could have selected Personal Workspace Feed, then this package would only be available inside of this My Workspace folder. Whereas if we select a tenant, it'll be available in any of these other folders, which used to be called modern folders. All right, I believe now they just call them folders. So if we come to tenant folders, you can see this is where you manage and create your folders. So I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm going to call this YouTube tutorial. And the description, I'll say addition bot example. Great. So I'm going to click create. So now we'll see we have our new YouTube tutorial folder, but we need to connect a machine to this folder. So I'm going to come to machines, and you can see there's currently no data to display. So we want to manage machines in folder and select our remote desktop machine. I'll then click update, and there it is. Awesome. So we now have a folder. Inside this folder, we can now go create a process. So let's go try this out. So let's click on the left-hand side, we want to click on YouTube tutorial, go to automations, and here under processes, we can click add process. And then we want to select the package we just deployed, which was the addition bot. So I want to select that, and then we can click next, display name. I'm just going to give it the same name, addition bot. Description, I'll just call it example process. And that is all we need. So I'm going to click create, success, and there is our process. Now we have our remote desktop here, so I want to test this and see if it's going to show this message box of the process inside of our remote desktop when you run it. So I'm going to come to jobs, I'm going to click start, and select the package. I'm going to say addition bot, cool. Any user, any machine. I'm just going to select these. I could have just left them as that because it's the only machine and user connected to this UiPath orchestrator. I'll click start, and now it's pending. Now let's go see. I'm opening the remote desktop. Let's see if anything pops up. Looks like nothing's happening. It's still pending. When this job can only run on a Windows machine and there is none connected to this folder. That's strange because a machine is connected to this folder. Let's do this. Let me just stop this job or kill it. Kill. Come here. Let me just refresh this. So there's our addition bot. It's awaiting install. So let me come install it here. Addition bot. Great. Now let's try run this again. Start. Addition bot. Now let's see if it's going to work. Still pending. That error message is gone now. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to try debug this, and then I'll get back to you with the solution. So after some debugging, I figured out what the issue was and I was able to fix it. So basically the problem was if I go to tenants and I go to folders, I had another folder here called my first folder. And if I went to machines, I had my unattended license assigned to my first folder. And then after I removed that license and deleted it, I then went back to the remote desktop. I signed out of assistant and I signed back in. And then when I came back to try and run the process from jobs over here, I was able to run it successfully. So let me just show you addition bot. For arguments, we can enter our arguments, for example, 2 and 55, save, start. So if we come to our remote desktop, you can see there's a pop-up, 57, 55 plus 2 is 57. Awesome. So that ran perfectly. So now that we have our orchestrator and licenses and folders and everything set up as we needed to, we can now continue with setting up our REST API inside of Bubble. All right, so the first step is we need to get a client ID and a refresh token. Okay, now I included a why after all the steps, so you understand the purpose of why we're doing these steps. So the client ID and refresh token is needed for authentication in step 2. So basically we need to follow these steps, and then we can get the client ID and the user token, also known as a refresh token, and then we can use that for step 2. So let's go do this quickly. First, we need to go to UiPath Cloud. So here we are in Orchestrator, but on the left is the Cloud button. So this is Orchestrator, and then the others, well, all of them all together classify as UiPath Cloud. So you want to click More and then Admin. Okay, and that'll take you to the next page. Just if you see here, so we log into UiPath Cloud, More, Admin, then we need to click the arrow on your tenant, then click the 3-dot menu, and then select API access. Right, so let's do that. So here under tenants, click this little arrow on our tenant. In my case, it's called default tenant. Then on orchestrator, we want to click the 3-dot and then select API access. That should open our API details. Great. So here we have our user key. So I'm going to copy that and I'm just going to come here. So the user key, I'm going to paste it over here just so we can reference it in the later steps. And the client ID is this one here. Copy that. And then I'm going to paste that client ID over here. Cool. The next step is authenticating. So why do we need to authenticate? We are authenticating so that we can get an access token, which we use in step 3. So basically we use these credentials here to do a post API call to this authenticating token API, which will then give us an access token. And then with that access token, we can then use it in step 3. So let's do that. We can come to Bubble now, and under plugins, API connector, we had previously created our addition bot API, and I'm going to create an API call over here. So I'm going to name this, I'll just call it authenticating. We can call it anything you want. All right, and then we need to set this to post, okay, because it's a post API call. And then the endpoint is this URL over here. So I'm going to copy this and I'm going to paste it over here. Cool. Next, you can see that it requires some headers. So we need a content type application JSON. So I'm going to click add header. The content type is equal to application/JSON, like that. You can add another header where the header required here is UiPath tenant name. And then on the right hand side, you can see you must enter the tenant name. So there's our UiPath tenant name, and here we need to enter our tenant name. So in my case, the tenant name is over here, this one here, default tenant. All right, so I'm going to name default tenant. You can also see the tenant name. If you come to home, you'll see it clearer over here under orchestrator services. Cool, so we got the name default tenant. This isn't case sensitive, but I'm just copying it exactly as it is just in case. Next, we have the parameters. So grant type So here under parameters, we can add parameter, grant type is equal to, and then the value is refresh token, like so. The client ID, add parameter, client ID, and then on the right hand side, we must enter the client ID from step 1. So step 1, we had the client ID over here. So I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to paste it in here. And then lastly, we have the refresh token. Refresh token, add parameter is equal to the user key from step 1. So let's get this user key over here. Control C, Control V. Great. And that is basically it for that. Next, we can execute it. So we execute the API call, then we can copy paste the access token. So note that the access token is a secret, okay, and it'll be used to authorize all your API calls for this tenant. So don't share that access token with anyone. In my case, I'm just going to revoke access to this API after I've completed making this video, but otherwise you want to make sure that this access token remains a secret. Great, so access token, let's go get that. So we come here and now we can simply click initialize call on this authenticating API. So initialize, and there you go, was successful. And here is our access token. So I'm actually just going to click show raw data over here, and then I'm going to highlight this access token from after the inverted comma all the way till here. So that's our actual access token. Cool. Then let's paste it over here. Don't know why it's not pasting. Let me try again. Copy. Seems to have frozen. I don't know why my browser is freezing right now. Oh, there you go. Uh-oh. This isn't good. Just gonna undo. And then once again, Control V. That's not what we want. Starts with EY. My bad. I'm accidentally copying the ID token as well. We only need the access token. So there you go. Copy. Delete all of that. Control V. There you go. That's better. So it starts with EY and ends with GA. Let's just double confirm that. Ends with GA, starts with EY. Awesome. So there is our access token. Cool. So that's all good. We have our access token. Just as a side note, if you want to see the documentation for where I got these API calls, you can click here for the documentation for step 1 and then click here for the documentation for step 2. Great. So next we have step 3 to get the release key. Why do we need to get a release key? So the release key is needed to define which process you want to run. Okay, so now if we come to UiPath and we go to Orchestrator and we go to our YouTube tutorial, automations, you can see we previously created this addition bot process. Now this process has what you call a release key. And this release key references, it's basically a code which references a certain process. So that's what we're doing in step 3. We're going to get this release key. So why the release key is needed to define which process you want to run. So the endpoint is a get, okay? So now we can come here, collapse this authenticating, and we can add another call, and we can call this one, let's call it get release key. Get release key. We'll keep it as get, and then we use our endpoint, which is this over here. But notice we need to enter our account name and tenant name. So where do we get that? If we come to Orchestrator and we look at the URL, make sure you click on Orchestrator, and then you'll see here, it'll say uipathcloud.uipath.com /, and then in my case, this is the account name, complete RPA bootcamp, and then default tenant is the tenant name. So I'm just going to copy this and paste it in here, and then I'm just going to replace this with this. So I'll copy that and right click, delete, Control V, and there you go. Make sure you don't have any additional /s and you copied it correctly. There's our account name, our tenant name, and the rest are data releases. So what this is actually going to do, it's going to show all the processes. It's going to show the release key for all the processes. So you're going to have to look at the output and find which process we are specifically looking for. So I'll get to that after we run it. But for now, we need to enter our authorization. So you can copy authorization, add headers, paste in authorization. Then we need a value here. The value is bearer. Then we add a space. So notice here, it's important. Please note the space after the word bearer. That's extremely important. You need that there. And then afterwards, you enter the access token from step 2, which is this access token here. So I'm going to copy this. And then I'm going to type bearer over here. Bearer space Control V. And there we have our authorization access key. Next, we want to add the header XUiPath tenant name. And once again, we're going to use our enter our tenant name. So in that case, it is default tenant. And then after that, we have the UiPath organization ID, Control C, Control V. And we need to enter the organization ID here. So this may be a little bit tricky to get, but basically how to get this is you want to go to get the TID value in the orchestrator URL. So here we are clicked on my folder that we are referencing, the YouTube tutorial. And then over here, actually, it doesn't matter which folder you selected on, the TID will remain the same. But we can come to the URL, and then you can see there's a whole bunch of things. There's also FID, so don't mistake those two. Make sure on TID, the tenant ID, you're going to copy, and then you're going to come here and paste that in. So that's basically the tenant or the organization ID, which we get from the URL. Okay, so in my case, it's 1069273 because it's this value here. I'm just going to highlight this just for reference, change the color. Cool. Next, we want to execute the API call, then copy paste the release key of the process you're trying to run and copy paste the organization unit ID. So from this, we're going to get the release key and what we call a organization unit ID. So here we are, we've completed this. Now we need to initialize. And there is our output. Okay, so now you'll see that there will be a key associated with every process key. So in your UiPath orchestrator, you might have a lot more outputs over here for every single different process. In my case, I only have one process. So I know it's this one over here, and it's referencing the process key, the open. Sorry, not we actually don't want this open remote desktop one. We want another one. The one we are looking for is the addition bot. So that was my mistake. Where is the addition bot? So you can see here there's two outputs, probably the two processes we have. So I'm just going to come here and show the raw data. See, there you go. Yeah, so it's easier when you show the raw data, you can see it all. So we can see here, we have our open remote desktop process. That's not the one we're referencing. We are referencing this one, the addition bot. Okay, and you can see here we have the key. So I'm going to come here, copy this key, and paste the release key over here. And then next we need to get the organization unit ID. We come here, there should be something called organization unit ID. There it is. So we're going to copy this, and I'm going to paste it over here. Awesome. Now we can move on to step 4. So we needed these values in order to use in the API for our start a job API. So what's the purpose of this API call? It is used to trigger or start a UiPath process, which is the whole purpose of this video. Is we are trying to trigger a job from an API call within a separate application. So let's get into that. I'm just going to collapse this and add another one. I'm going to call this one start a job. And if we look here, the endpoint is a post. So I'm going to click this drop down, select post, and then the endpoint over here is this long URL. I'll paste that in, and then make sure we need to also replace the account name and tenant name with our account name and tenant name. So I'm going to get it from the URL, copy, paste. Awesome. Next we have the headers. So we need to do authorization, add headers, authorization. Once again, we're going to use bearer. Actually, instead of doing that, I'm just going to come copy paste it from here since we knew it worked. Control C, Control V. There's our authorization, which is the bearer and the access token from step 2. Next, we have the content type, application JSON. So let me add that header. Then we have UiPath tenant name, and our tenant name, we know what it is. It's default tenant. I can also just copy it from here. We also have our organization unit ID. All right, enter organization unit ID from step 3. So organization unit ID, and then in step 3, remember we copy pasted this organization unit ID. So I'm going to copy this and paste it there. Great. Next, we have these parameters we need to add. So notice here under parameters, you can either add JSON parameters like we were doing before, or you can change this to form data or just raw. So I'm going to set it to raw. You could also just keep it as JSON, and then you enter the code over here, which is this code that we need to use. So this is basically the same thing. It's got the key pairs just like a normal JSON, but the difference is it has the start info. So we're not able to add the start info JSON title over here with our parameters. So that's why we need to use it in the body over here. So here we are. So you can see here the release key, it's required to enter the release key from step 3, which is this release key here. So, and then we also need to put input arguments over here. So we need to put our argument number 1 name, argument number 2 name. If you have more arguments than this, you can simply just add a comma as we do there, and then just copy the exact format of this. And then you can put a comma there, paste it afterwards, and then you can have 3 parameters or arguments if you want, or 4, or however many you want. If you don't have any arguments, you can just delete this portion, and it'll just be blank arguments, and then it'll run successfully. But in our case, we do have 2 arguments, so I'm going to use this exact expression. I'm going to Control C, Control V. Next, we need to enter our release key from step 3. So let's go copy that. Here's our release key. Copy, and I'm going to replace this here with our release key. Then we have our input arguments, argument number 1 name. So let's go see what we called our arguments. So our argument number 1 was first number, lowercase f, uppercase N. So I'm going to replace this here with first number, and then the second number is our second argument name, lowercase s, second number. And then by default, just to initialize this call, I'm going to keep these values 1 and 2, and it should then run and add 1 and 2 together to give us the number 3. But let's go initialize the call. Great. So that ran successfully. you'll notice we have our input arguments. First number is 1, second number is 2. It's not going to show any output arguments because what we're doing here is only running the process. All right, so we can click save. Let's actually go see if, yep, there it is. It ran it. So you can see there's our number 3. It successfully ran. You can click OK, and awesome. So we can test this with other numbers here. Let's go 5 and 6. It should add up to 11. So reinitialize call. We come to, there it is. There's our number 11. Awesome. So we are successfully managing to start a job using an API call. So this is very good news. The next thing we want to do is we actually want to get the output result and display it in the front end of our application. But before we even get to that, let's first come to our bubble design, to our addition bot, and we are going to set up the workflow so that when we click this button, it's actually going to trigger the process. So I also included those details here to run a job in Bubble. Here it is. So the front end looks like that, which we have over there. Then the back end, we want to trigger a start job API on button click. Okay, so let's go do that. So on the RunBot, we want to basically start or edit a workflow, right? So when button RunBot is clicked, click here to add an action. We then want to trigger the API call. So we can come to, one thing you need to make sure of is when we go to our API call over here for the starter job, we want to make sure it's used as an action. Okay, so use as action, reinitialize call, save. Now if we come here, when we go to plugins, you'll see our addition bot start a job is available. So I'm going to click start a job, and you can see here is our JSON body. So our parameters 5 and 6 here, these two arguments, these are variables which we get from our first number and second number inputted by the user. So we can simply just backspace this number 5 and click insert dynamic data and say input enter first number, it's value. And then we're going to do the same thing for the number 6 over here, insert dynamic data, input enter second number's value, just like that. So now when we enter a number, a first number and a second number and run the bot, it should then trigger the bot in the remote desktop. So let's preview this and give it a test, see if this works. Great. So enter first number, I'm going to put 100, and then second number 300. So we know it should return 400. So I'm going to click run bot. Cool. So now it's probably busy running the bot in the UiPath remote desktop. Let's open it. I didn't click OK from the previous run here, but I'll click OK. It should then trigger the next process. And there is our 400. Awesome. So that worked exactly as we wanted it to. So that's working perfectly. Click OK, and we are done. So now that's all good and well. We're able to start a process from our public web application. But let's say we want to actually return the answer from the output, all right? And we want to display that number 400 over here, for instance. How do you do that? That is why we have our step 4 over here. Our step 5, which is to get the output result. So this is another API call we need to use. And what this does is it will return the output from a job that was run. So we need to reference which job we are running. And then from there, we are able to return the output. So this part is a bit trickier than the previous steps, but I'll show you right now exactly how to do it. So we have our endpoint, which is this over here. I should have mentioned this is a get endpoint because we are getting data. Okay, so we have get. Let's come back here to our plugins, and then go create a new a new API call, and we can call this get output data from job. You can call that whatever you want. Okay, and then it's default set to get, and then from there also we can set this to an action. From there we want to use this URL. Okay, and notice we have our account name, tenant name, and then we also have this URL parameter key. So this URL parameter key is the job key we're going to get from the job run in step 4. All right, so this can get a bit tricky because we now need to save a job key, the job key of the previous run, in a custom state in Bubble. So I'll just create a custom state on this page, and I'll call it, let's just call it job key. State type, I'll keep it as a text. All right, create. I'll have no default value for the job key. Then what we want to do is after the starter job, right? So after this API call is run, we want to click add an action. And what we want to do is we want to set a state. So we go to element actions, set state. So then the element is on the index page, which is basically the page. Then the job key is what we're referencing. And the value is the result of step 1's. And then we click OData context. Is it here? No, let's go back to value. Yes, this is what we're looking for. So we want to look for something to do with the key here. Each item's key. Let's just see if there's any other thing to do with the key. No, that's it. Each item's key, and then that's a list of items. We want to get the first item, and then that will now save the job key to a custom state. Now that job key is what we are going to be referencing in the URL parameter key over here. So for now, I'm going to come here and I'm going to copy this and I'm going to paste it over here. I'm going to make sure we have our correct tenant name, account name, and tenant name. So I'll paste that there. And then you can see here it says use square brackets for parameters. So here is our URL parameter key. So create a key called URL parameter key. And then the value over here is the URL parameter key. So like, let me show you if I initialize this started job. If I come and reinitialize this job, it gives us a key for that specific job. So if I copy this and I paste it here, it's going to basically get the output data for that job we just ran right now. So that's how we are going to be referencing the specific jobs. But this is of course going to be a variable which are going to pull from the page state. Right, next we have the authorization. So same thing in the headers, authorization. Just going to copy it from here. Then what else do we have? We have content type equals application JSON. Content type equals application JSON. Then it looks like that's all we need to get the output data. Then execute, we will return a JSON output from which we must get the output argument. And that is basically all. So let's do that. So remember, we ran this, it had 5 and 6. So the output will then be 5 plus 6, which is 11. So let's see if that output is correct. Initialize call. And now let's scroll down to our output arguments. No sample data. That's not good. I thought this would now return our output arguments. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try debug this. Right, so I'm back and I figured out what the problem was. So the reason why it wasn't showing the output is because we weren't letting the process finish because we need to click OK on the message box in order for the process to finish running. And only once the process finishes running will it pass the output argument and save it. So let me just show you again. So if we come to Orchestrator and we come to our jobs, I'll refresh here, you can see we have no jobs running. If we come here to our start a job and I click reinitialize call and I come to Orchestrator, you're going to see it's now started, it's busy running the process. And it's going to continue to say running until I have clicked OK on this message box. So now if I click OK, all right, and it'll say successful, this I over here. And we can see the output values, the addition result is 6. First number is 3, second number is 3, and the addition is 6. So now if we come here and we copy this key, right, copy, save, and then I'm going to put this key in over here. And now if I reinitialize this call, and I come to our output arguments, there we have our addition result is 6. So there we have it. It is now working. So it was working the whole time. We just needed to make sure we click OK on the message box to let the process finish running. Awesome. So I'll click save here. Next, I want to just make sure that this remains as a variable. So our URL parameter key, I'll keep that over here. And I'll just use this release key as the value over there. Make sure we have clicked OK. Reinitialize this call. And our output is there. Awesome. Save. Cool. So that's working fine. So we have our get output data from job. Now we can come to our to display that result in Bubble. We have already set the page state to the job key, so that's this set state, and we have the result of step 1's key. So we have that. Next, we want to get the result. Button is click, trigger the get result API using the job key in the state. All right, so let's do that. So I'm going to add another button, and I'll just call it something like get result. Okay. Like that. And then when this button is clicked, go to plugins, we have our addition bot get output data from job. All right, notice that there's no place to enter variable. So what we want to do is we want to go to plugins, and then you want to make sure your URL parameter is not private. When it's not private, you'll see it provides a place where we can enter our URL parameter key. Currently it's static. We want to delete that. Enter our dynamic URL parameter, which is the indexes job key. All right, and that's the job key we save over here, which is a result of the job we ran in the previous step. So there we get our, we are able to then run the job. After that, we want to actually display it. So we want to display the output argument data in a group. So we can create a group. Let's drag this container. I'll just put it here. And type of content, I'll just make a text. Okay. Then I'm going to add a piece of text inside the group, which is going to display the parent group's text. Now it's currently empty. We need to first send data to this group, right? So we're going to click here to add an action. I'm going to go to element actions, display data. So the element we wanted to display in is our group text. Okay, that one we just created, which is this. We can give it a different name. We can just say output text. You'll see it's now referencing the output text element. Data to display, that is the result of step 1's. Now we want to go reference the value, and then we want to look for the output arguments. There you go. And it's currently a list, so we want to grab the first item. There you go. So now if we come refresh this, we can enter a number, say 6 and 8. We can click RunBot. Okay, let's just make sure we click OK. Obviously in a real world project we're not going to have a message box. It'll all run completely independent of a human having to click on any message boxes. Minimize this. Now we know the answer is 14. Let's click get result. There you go. Addition result is 14. Awesome. So now it's showing the result in the front end of our web application. Let's say we just wanted to show the 14. We can just do some string manipulation the same way we do it in UiPath. We can click more, and we can say split it, say by I don't know, the colon, split by the colon, and then grab the last item, and then we can split it again by that curly brace, split by the close brace, and then grab the first item. So now let's refresh this. Let's click get results again, and there it is, our result 6. So now let's go again. Let's go 100 plus 5, RunBot. Okay, let's come here. There's 105. Okay, minimize this, get result 105. Awesome. So obviously this isn't the best user experience of having to click run and then get result, but there is other ways in Bubble where you can get it, where you just click RunBot and then it'll show the result. But yeah, the main purpose of this video was just to be able to trigger a bot from a public web application and then also display the output in that web application, just like we did here with our addition bot example. So yeah, I hope this video was helpful to you. If it was, please do like this video, leave a comment if you have any questions, and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more content like this. And yeah, if you are interested in becoming an RPA developer with UiPath, I do have a free training on that, RPA training. So you can go to this URL, and at this training you can register for the web class, and it's your step-by-step training to go from beginner to pro with RPA in 2022. Learn how to become an RPA developer the easy way. So yeah, I highly recommend you check this out if you are interested in becoming an RPA developer. But other than that, I hope this video was helpful, and cheers for now.